You know how Mercedes shocked the world in 1901 with the 35 PS, that monster that basically invented the modern car? Well, fast forward nearly 30 years, and BMW finally joins the race. But here's the twist. They didn't start with a powerhouse. Nope, they began with this tiny little thing. This is the BMW 3/15 PSDA2, the very first car ever to wear the BMW badge. It's small, it's simple, and honestly, it looks more like a toy than a driving machine. But don't let the looks fool you, because this little box on wheels is where BMW's story truly begins. And the crazy part? Without this, there would be no M3s, no 7 Series, no ultimate driving machines at all. So today, we're going back to where it all started. The car that turned BMW from the sky to the streets. Alright, let's rewind the story a bit, because BMW's journey to cars wasn't smooth or simple. They didn't start by building sleek luxury sedans or high-performance beasts. Nope, BMW began in the skies. They were engine makers for airplanes. Precision, engineering, performance, that's what they were known for. But then, the war ended. Germany lost. And suddenly, they weren't allowed to build aircraft anymore. Just like that, boom. Everything they were, everything they stood for, gone. Imagine that for a second. Your entire identity, your purpose, wiped out overnight. So what do you do when the sky is taken away from you? BMW looked down to the roads. They started small, motorcycles first. Machines that carried that same engineering DNA, just closer to the ground. And slowly, one piston at a time, they rebuilt themselves. Then came the late 1920s. The world was changing again. Germany was still recovering from the financial storm of World War I. People were broke, and luxury, that was a fantasy. But here's the twist. BMW saw an opportunity. Not everyone needed a fast car. They needed a reliable one. What did BMW do? They bought a small factory in Eisenach. That factory was making a German version of the British Austin 7, a tiny, affordable car that kept people moving when life was tough. And here's the part that still surprises people. The very first BMW car wasn't even designed by BMW. It was licensed, re-engineered, and improved. But that didn't matter, because what BMW did was take something small and make it theirs. They gave it precision, style, and pride. That's how the BMW 3/15 PSDA2 was born. Not from luxury or ego, but from survival, resilience, and a desire to move forward when the world told them to stop. Okay, first impressions. Look at it. Small, boxy, kind of toy-like. 4 tiny wheels, fabric roof, and an interior that makes your office chair look luxurious. The seats? More like wooden benches with a thin layer of leather. But pause for a second. Compare this to the clunky, heavy carriage-style cars of just 20 years earlier. This was light, modern, functional, a car that normal families could actually use. And notice the tires. Thin, almost bicycle-like compared to the fat rubber we see today. Suspension, basic leaf springs, safety? Forget it. No belts, no crumple zones. But it worked. This wasn't about showing off wealth. It was about freedom. For the first time, an average family in Germany could pile in and drive out of the city without relying on horses or trains. That was revolutionary in its own quiet way. Now let's talk performance. Under that little bonnet sat a 748 cubic centimeter 4-cylinder engine making just 15 horsepower. I know, your lawnmower probably has more, but here's the key. The car only weighed about 400 kilos. That meant it could hit around 75 to 80 kilometers per hour. Alright, stop for a second and imagine yourself in 1929. You're used to horses trotting at maybe 15 kilometers per hour. Trains are fast, but you don't control them, and then suddenly, you're behind the wheel of this tiny machine, wind rushing through the open roof, the engine buzzing like a sewing machine, and you're flying down a country road at 70 kilometers per hour. Back then, that felt like light speed. Villagers probably stared in shock as you zip past carriages and bicycles. Kids pointed, jaws dropped. This wasn't power like the Mercedes 35 PS. This was accessibility. A car that regular people could afford and actually drive. And that was BMW's genius, not raw horsepower, but giving the average driver their first taste of real independence. Now let's talk about owning one today. And I know what you're thinking. Wow, imagine having the very first BMW ever made. Well, good luck finding one, because honestly, they're ghosts. Only a handful of BMW 315s still exist, tucked away safely in museums or locked in private collections where they're treated more like family heirlooms than machines. These aren't cars you take out for a spin. These are stories on wheels, preserved pieces of history that whisper, "This is where it all began." If by some miracle one did show up at an auction, it wouldn't just sell. It would shock collectors. Not because it's luxurious, not because it's fast, 15 horsepower? A bicycle might challenge it on a good day, but that's not the point. The real value isn't under the hood, it's in the heartbeat of the story. You're not just buying metal and gears, you're buying the beginning of BMW itself. The courage to rebuild, the spirit to reinvent, the moment the wings of an aircraft maker turned into the wheels of a car. So yeah, you won't be overtaking anyone on the highway. But if you ever stood beside one, really looked at it, the small frame, the badge, the simplicity, you'd feel something deeper. You'd realize this little 315ths didn't just start BMW's journey, it defined it. It proved that even after losing everything, you can rise again and build something the world will never forget. Let's talk about the price, because this is where things get interesting. Back in 1929, you could buy a brand new BMW 3/15 for around 2,200 Reichsmarks. That's roughly $520 back then, or about $9,000 to $10,000 in today's money. Doesn't sound like much, right? But here's the twist. That was still more than what most people in Germany earned in an entire year. So owning one wasn't just transportation, it was a statement. Now here's the twist. BMW wasn't alone. Mercedes-Benz was already in the game, but their cars were luxury machines, double, sometimes triple the price, out of reach for the average person. Then there were others. Opel, Dixie, Hanomag, even Ford Germany, all fighting to make affordable cars for the masses. But BMW's little 3/15, it hit the sweet spot. Cheap enough to dream about, solid enough to trust, and, most importantly, wearing a badge that felt different. You weren't buying a car just to move from A to B. You were buying a piece of hope from a company that had lost everything and decided to start again. In a time when Germany was rebuilding, this tiny 3/15ths became more than just a machine. It was a symbol that said, "We're back on the road." So, does the BMW 3/15 really deserve to be called a legend? You know what? Yeah, it does. Not because it was fast or loud or luxurious, but because it started everything. This was BMW taking its very first step, and from that step came decades of innovation, power, and that pure driving thrill we all talk about today. Now just picture it. It's 1929. No seatbelts, no radio, no fancy tech. Just you, a wooden steering wheel, and 15 horses pushing you down a dirt road. Wind in your face, engine humming, heart racing. Would you still take that ride? I know I would. Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I'd really love to hear. Would you have the guts to drive the very first BMW? And hey, stick around. We've got more incredible stories from the golden age of cars coming next.